Hey, this is Coach Deanna with another episode of the Winning Element podcast, The Athlete's Journey. Today we are on the journey with Emily Pappas. Emily has her master's in exercise physiology. She's an adjunct professor at Temple University in Pennsylvania, and she is the owner of Relentless Athletics. In this episode, we explore why there is a disparity between women and men in the weight room, the societal pressure and the timeline around females in sport, and most importantly, the myths about female athletes and strength training. We also talk about the balancing act that comes with performance and improvement, and how less is not always more and more is not always better. We finish off the episode talking about the 3 most critical nutrition strategies for athletes. Whether you are a current athlete or a former athlete, you are going to love this conversation with Emily. This podcast is brought to you by The Winning Element, a mental and physical performance platform for athletes. Our flagship product has been getting attention from Olympians, colleges, and high school programs across the world. We are in Australia, Japan, Canada, and Costa Rica. The flagship product is the Winning Element Gold Edition. It's my best-selling book, The Winning Element, An Athlete's Guide to Maximizing Mental and Physical Performance. And it's the 365-day dynamic planner. This program is going to be a game changer for you in 2019. You're going to learn hundreds of strategies to elevate your game, and you're going to have the tool to help you organize and optimize your days. Now, we're halfway through the year, and if you're not getting the results that you want and that you deserve, you need to make some changes. If you're not making the progress, or if you're not going fast enough, if you're not achieving your goals, you need to do something different. And now is the time to take action to empower yourself with the strategies that actually help you get the full benefit of your training. Now, this comprehensive athlete development program is perfect for individual athletes and teams. Listeners and fans of this podcast will receive 10% off, free shipping, online resources, and more. Visit www.BeTheWinningElement.com/gold edition. This podcast is also brought to you by Whoop. Now, Whoop is my favorite wearable, and it's the choice of professional athletes and serious fitness enthusiasts. If you are serious about performance training and leveling up your life, you need to get yourself a Whoop. Now, Whoop provides data on your heart rate, your sleep, your strain, your heart rate variability, and more. Now, the data that I get from my Whoop helps me plan my workouts, my recovery days, and it helps me make smarter choices that better serve my mind and body. If you're constantly overtraining, you risk injury, adrenal fatigue, and decreased performance. And nobody wants any of those things. I've been using my Whoop for about 2.5, 3 years, and I'm actually a founding member. And I continue to use it because it helps me understand my body and get the most out of my training. Now, Whoop is a little bit different than other wearables because it's subscription-based, meaning you pay every month instead of all at once. Now, they just put out their Whoop 3.0. I'm really excited to upgrade to it. It has a ton of awesome features. You should definitely go over and check it out. You can get 1 month for free of Whoop by going to www.BeTheWinningElement.com/Whoop. That's WHOOP. As always, you can access show notes, the special offer for the Gold Edition, and our product highlight for this episode at www.BeTheWinningElement.com/podcast 013. I hope you enjoy this episode with Emily. Let's go. Please welcome to the Winning Element, Emily Pappas, owner of Relentless Athletics. Emily, I'm so excited to have you on the show again. Since we tried to do this last week and we had a ginormous tech failure, but the best part is that we get to do this again, and it's going to be better, and it's going to be a little bit different than what we originally had planned. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Deanna. I'm so excited to be able to do this part 2, make it even better. Life happens, so I'm excited.
It's amazing. In our first interview last week, we talked about the fact that I've been following you for about 5 years, which was about when you started Relentless Athletics. And I own the female athlete inspiration page on Instagram. And at the time that I was like building that following and really getting on that, I was looking at all of the other female athletes specific accounts, and I fell in love with yours, like your branding, what you are doing. And I was like, I think she only does female athletes. This is amazing. Because a lot of people they double down and they do both. But I just love that you really focus and that your passion is female athletes. It's amazing. I love it.
I love it as well. I mean, I opened up Relentless with just the intention of filling a need that I felt needed to be filled, and that nobody really talks to. I always say, what about that girl that's going to play D1 soccer? No one's talking to her. What about getting her ready for her sport? What about helping her understand why she keeps getting injured, or helping her understand why she feels like she hits the wall by halftime every single game? That's the girl that I want to talk to because I can relate to her. So that was kind of my passion behind starting Relentless.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm really excited to dig in some of the topics surrounding your specialty, exercise science and nutrition. You ready to rock it?
Definitely. I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. One of the things that I love about you is that you always bring current science and research into the conversation. And I'm not one of those people who like to dig through all the research and sift through everything, but I know that you are, and you're super passionate about it. So I'm excited to pick your brain and learn something new and bring conversations around female athletes and strength training to light. One of your passions is myth busting with current science. And one of the most common and I guess cringe-worthy statements that I know that we all hear from female athletes and coaches is, well, I don't want to get big or bulky or look manly. And it's awful. And we hear it so frequently with female athletes. So I'm excited to unpack this and look at the history of females and sport and the cultural influences that really have contributed to where we are today.
Definitely. I mean, this is just the fact that this is still a question that I come across all the time just baffles my mind, because even just a week ago, I had a mom and her daughter come in, and the mom was like, I don't want my daughter to get bulky, so let's probably not have her go too heavy. And at first I'm like, what? And then I stop and realize this is such a great opportunity to educate, because I'm so fortunate enough that I understand the science behind it. I understand that there's some fears for some people in terms of, I don't want one aspect of my life to then completely undermine an aspect of my other life. And listen, I get that. But at the same time, my response is always, have you seen a guy that is just, kind of scrawny little guy? And then you see another guy that just puts on muscle really fast. Like, yeah. I'm like, well, see, that's a spectrum. So females are also on that spectrum, and that some of us are just going to always be a little smaller, and we may not respond as fast to strength training as somebody else that may just naturally have a little bit more muscle to her and may naturally just be a fast sprinter, just super strong to begin with. We're on that spectrum as well. So we need to stop the conversation of bulky and not bulky, because all females are created differently. And it does not mean that you have to be tiny and slender to be a female. That doesn't really make sense, right? There's different shapes and sizes of females everywhere. Instead, we have to think about what body composition is going to best help your daughter perform and reduce her chance of injury. So being stick and bones is not going to allow her to reach those goals. It's just not. And unfortunately, if that's her goal, then competitive sport is probably not for her. But if her goal is to be as strong, fast, and powerful as ever while reducing her chance of injury, then it's time to get strong. And I guess a big conversation that we need to have is that there is a vast difference between bodybuilding and strength training. And bodybuilding is a sport where you win that sport based on how your body is built. And that's awesome. So some females that participate in bodybuilding, goodness, that is such a mentally draining sport in itself, the level of leanness that they have to get, and props to them. However, it's a very different sport than a girl that's going to go play D1 soccer. The girl that's playing D1 soccer has different needs versus the bodybuilder. So they will not be trained the same. I think my favorite conversation was with this mom, and I was like, so actually, this is where I try to simplify the science, and that we need to periodize her training. That in the beginning, we're going to do a little more reps and really get her tendons, muscles, and ligaments ready. And then as we get closer to the season, the volume of our reps go down and the amount of weight on the bar is going to go up a little bit. And I said, actually heavy lifts don't get you, quote unquote, really muscular. Rather, actually light weights with super high reps do. And the Vesta, she looked at me, she goes, well, what makes you say that? And the Vesta was like, well, science. And I said, well, just think. And she just looked very confused. And I said, well, think about it. I said, the more work you do that's going to tear your muscles down, right? The more time under tension, that's going to, at the end of the day, lead to more muscle hypertrophy. So doing a set of 5 at a heavier weight versus doing a set of 12 at a lighter weight, the set of 12 is going to have more time under tension and produce some more muscular damage than, let's say, the set of 5. I go, so if you want to think it's simply that way, heavy weights aren't really going to do what you think they are. And we need to kind of start understanding that a little bit before we start shying away from heavy weights. And that conversation in itself was kind of really awesome because she kind of just stopped and realized, okay, there's a lot more to this than what she thought she knew, if that makes sense.
I think it's also a matter of what everybody thinks they know. Like it's exercise science and physiology. The human body is incredibly complex. Mm-hmm. And exercise science is also incredibly complex. It's manageable, it's doable, you can understand it, but it does take time. And there are a lot of different aspects to enhancing your ability to perform physically, whether that's speed, power, endurance, mobility, strength. All of those things call for different movements. All of those things call for different training modalities, and strength is just a piece of that. So depending on people's goals, that's going to look, their program is going to look a lot different. But people, most sport parents, especially sport parents that never played sports themselves or, weren't exposed to coaches who had this information in the first place, you're doing double the work educating them because they want to know what their daughter or what their son is doing. And you're doing really great work doing that. I think. Well,
a big thing that you mentioned too was that the history, and that we like to kind of bring that into the conversation and say, okay, we understand why we have this perception that strength training is going to be more of a masculine thing. I mean, listen, most high schools prioritize football players in the weight room before any other sport. That, of course, is creating this perception that weightlifting is for men. And I get that. But when we kind of talk about, all right, let's look at the history of female in sports. And that females, after Title IX was 1970. Before that, we had different sport rules. Females that played basketball were only allowed to dribble the ball a certain amount of times. They created gymnasiums so that there weren't going to be as many spectators, because if there were too many spectators, then that may lead to overexertion. And there's this whole concept that sport kind of allowed women to start to redefine what it means to be a female and to be an athlete, and that females could be strong. Females could have roles that show that they are competitive and that they are able to be independent and do things that previously history kind of inhibited their ability to do that. 1980s, finding the women were able to compete under the big NCAA umbrella. From there, that's kind of when exercise science really started to pick up, and that more and more athletes understood the necessity of getting stronger. However, we remember, okay, before that, there was this whole concept of becoming muscle bound. So it wasn't a male or female thing then. It was just weight training isn't going to be good. 1980s, you start to understand, okay, yeah, it is going to be good. So it was slow for men as well. By the 1990s, a lot more men were getting exposed to it. But remember, high competitive sport was just new for females. But by the 1990s, ACL tears were considered an epidemic for females. And so because our mind frame was initially males versus females, what's our biological difference? All of our medical studies were, let's look at the difference of our hormones. Let's look at our difference of our hips and knee structures, and that must be why. Versus saying, okay, wait a second. Are females getting exposed to the same type of training as men? And even from an evolutionary perspective, look at the different loading that we've been able to introduce females to, the different type of competitive nature. If we've inhibited females from becoming too competitive, their bodies haven't been able to adapt. The human body is fascinating. Literally, you can get your body to adapt to any type of stressor. However, it's going to take some time. So when we start to pull back and look at the medical discourse and say, okay, maybe it isn't just biological. Maybe it isn't just a hormonal thing, because we know that hormones are in a spectrum. And like I said, some girls are going to put on muscle a little bit more. Some guys are going to be a little scrawnier. That's okay. It's a spectrum. So instead of looking at male versus females, hormones, why don't we look also about nurture versus nature, right? Let's look at how we've been training females to be competitive. And that's a conversation that when we say, hey, maybe that's why instead of fearing the weight room, we have to understand that by not exposing females to the one tool that we know will help reduce their chances of injury, maybe that's why all of these girls keep getting injured. And instead of fearing the weight room for becoming muscular and bulky, let's look at strength training as a means that's going to train females how to become more aware of their bodies, more coordinated. We're developing these motor skills as well as physical characteristics. And if we look at strength training as that versus just muscularity, I think we're going to be able to change the conversation a bit, as strength training makes you bulky to strength training makes you athletic. And that's the conversation I want us to start having.
That's beautiful. Are you seeing in your geographical area, are you starting to see that start to shift in high schools, in clubs? Are you starting to see that more of the female athletes are being introduced to the weight room earlier, that, cultural influences, that people are now becoming more educated about the science? Are you starting to see that in your area?
Slow and steady. So when I started Relentless 3.5, almost 4 years ago, no, we got a lot of pushback, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to get pushback when you know you're doing something that's different and necessary. So I'm glad we got a lot of pushback. And now that we've been here for a while, we've kind of just developed a reputation of females that are excelling and females that are not getting injured and females that are not only excelling on their sport, they are confident.
Yes, this is the big thing.
Awesome. It is. It's a huge thing. And from there, we have been able to really explain to more and more athletes and parents the importance of strength training. And we're getting a lot less pushback and a lot more buy-in, and that's fantastic. At the end of the day, I say there's gyms everywhere, right? I love what we do because we provide a very individualized approach to all of our athletes, because we want to teach these motor skills before anything else. That's just long-term athletic development. That's kind of the goal. But with that, our biggest goal is we want to help educate females and their parents and coaches everywhere. I mean, yeah, I see a lot of great girls coming in and coaches that are all about it. But I just talked to a new female coach that was my age, and she was a Division I field hockey player. And she was telling me that she wants her girls only to do speed and agility, and we can introduce strength training as the cherry on top. And for me, that was just so painful to hear, because I tried my best. I said, well, didn't you participate in strength training when you were in Division I? She's like, oh, yeah. I said, well, did you see it affect you anyway? Oh, definitely. And I said, well, if you want your girls to be more agile and faster, we need to understand that strength training is the base. And it's unfortunate that there's still so many coaches out there that still see it that way. However, I also have to remember she probably wasn't exposed to strength training until she was in college. So in her mind, that's the right way to go about it, right? Versus us saying, no, actually, that's too late. We need to get females to become aware of our bodies and develop these motor skills at a younger age. Because when we do that, we develop the base from which these sport-specific skills can stem from. And it's so much easier for a girl to learn how to properly kick a soccer ball while bracing her core when she already has an awareness of how to brace her core and how to use her legs when she's done that in the weight room. So yes and no, I see great changes, and then I also see not so great changes. So I think that's just right. It's just how life is. But the more and more we have these conversations and speak to coaches, athletes, their parents about these misconceptions, I think the further we're going to be able to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for you, I heard a lot about your athlete journey and how you grew up doing athletic things, but not really being an athlete. And, it wasn't till you were in college and you were learning about strength training that that body awareness and that confidence really clicked for you. And, I'd love for you to tell listeners more about, how strength training helped to change your mind and body and kind of, we've heard a little bit about how Relentless started, but that piece right before of how that individually impacted you.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I was that girl I always had the athletic mindset and that I'm very determined and I always wanted to get better. However, just genetically not that gifted and that my body awareness not really there. If I would make the team, I was a girl on the bench. But I was fast. And for me, the tools that were provided to me back then were just keep running, keep getting faster, keep playing your sport. That's how you're going to get better. And I did that and I fell in love with running because at least that was the one thing that I could do I was pretty good at. I hated track. I just like doing things on my own. I'm an independent type of person and I kept getting injured. And once I got into college, I was really exposing myself to my undergrad is in biological sciences with a concentration in biochemistry. So I love studying the molecular mechanisms that underscore those processes, but at the same time, I'm a big self-learner. So I was pulling out textbooks on the side of what the heck is strength training? What are these things? Because for me, when I was injured, that was the only thing I could do. I'm only elliptical. I'm like, well, this is boring. And I'm looking at blogs. That's what we had back then. And I see strength training, which was in my mind, it was bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And I remember participating in that and feeling like I loved the getting stronger aspect. However, I just didn't like the aspect of focusing on what my body looked like because that for me it wasn't really healthy for me because I wanted to look at what my body could do in terms of physically, the force I could produce. And then from there, I felt like my body composition would reflect that. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be that athlete that you would see, like Mia Hamm. I looked up to her so much growing up because she just embodied an athlete to me. And so I found a female doing power cleans on a blog. So I go to the regular gym. I'm trying to teach myself those things. Awesome. I got exposed to CrossFit for a little bit. They were a brick and mortar gym. There was a very different type of CrossFit. They did my first workout was like work up to a heavy back squat and let's do some hard farmer carries, zercher carries, and on the side I was like, hey, do you guys do these Olympic lifts? And they're like, we're not really experts on this, but you want to do them in the corner, go for it. And I was like, cool. So they used to nickname me Cleaning Emily because I would literally just be trying to teach myself cleans for like an hour. Yeah. So at least with the internet, I was so fortunate to see all of these videos. I learned so much from Catalyst Athletics. They have fantastic video libraries and programs and was able to teach myself, get some online coaches, found a great coach in person. And from there, as I started to engage myself in weightlifting and I played pickup soccer on the side, I started, pulling out these skills with the ball. And I was like, where the heck did that come from? How did I know how to react that fast?
Was it like you downloaded it like Matrix style? Like you're like, where did this come from?
Literally. It's just like, where is that? How did I do that? And that's when I realized, goodness, strength training gets you not just stronger, but it builds these motor skills. And I'm so fascinated by the neuromuscular adaptations that you can make through, especially weightlifting, because weightlifting teaches you how to accelerate, change direction, decelerate, and then redirect that force. And that is a component in literally every sport that you play. So by building those brain connections, your brain literally adapts. That then carries over to improving your performance. And for me, that was just juggling the soccer ball and creating these like crazy stops. And I was like, how did I do that? And from there, that's when I kind of realized, goodness, I wish someone gave me this tool at a younger age because I couldn't imagine the athlete that I could have become. And on top of that, I was building confidence in that I was looking at what my body could do versus what it looked like. And for me, adolescence, that high school age was the hardest age, just like it is for any girl growing up, because you're self-conscious. You're taught that you have to look this way, but your body might actually look this way, and you feel like you don't fit into that box. And strength training allowed me to realize there's so many other boxes, and I just felt so confident by the moment I had that barbell in my hand that, goodness, look at what my body can do. And from there, I just kind of had this idea that besides building fantastic athletes, I want to help girls become confident, because at the end of the day, that's what sport does, right? We help build better people. And I just was like, this is so awesome. Strength training is that golden ticket. And I want to help give more girls this ticket that I wish someone gave me at that age.
I'm right there with you. I remember in high school, I had asked for a gym membership from my parents for, I think it was like Christmas. And it was something that I was like, this is something I want. And they were like, are you sure you're actually going to use it? And I'm like, yes, I'm 100% sure that I want to use this. And I remember going and learning and watching, doing a lot of watching, which might have been a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. But so, sometimes good. So I was watching a lot, and I was doing different movement patterns and really trying to build strength. I had historically, and I guess I still have historically bad ankles and weaker knees, right? So and my quad's like this big. It's ginormous. I'm 6'1", so it's like all.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So
I'm 5'7", so I feel you though on that long femur life.
It's a lot.
Not as much as you, but I feel you. I got long femurs as well.
It's huge, right? So and for me, I'm a pretty thin build, so for me to bulk up or build muscle, and at the time my nutrition was awful, so that's a whole different conversation. But for me to build strength and stability in those areas during that time was game changing. And even when I went to college and I got better and actually had a strength and conditioning coach, and I had somebody to really show me different things, that made a huge difference. When I started, when I came back from it was summer break, I would come back to California. I went to school in Texas, came back to California, and I would cross train by mountain biking three, 4 times a week. And these are hills. So, it's a lot of quad, it's a lot of push, and it takes a lot, right? But at the end of the summer, after the 12 weeks, and after doing all of the other things, the mountain biking was just part of it. But my ability to not get injured, that training period of going hard and making sure that I was taking care of everything that I would need to get me through 3 months of season and not get injured. Like, that was the big goal, is like, do not get injured during season.
Yeah.
And it was a game changer for me, as well as, aesthetically. I felt I looked more fit. I felt I looked more athletic. And it was something that, physical feats are ways to gain. It's one of, like you said, the golden ticket to gain confidence, because you can actively see yourself improve, whether that's your sprint time, whether that's, how much weight you can handle, whether that's, however you're going to measure it. It's one of the easiest ways to gain confidence, because you're actively seeing changes. It's a dynamic process.
Exactly.
We talk about, balancing as a training act, and, there's the difference, like I was talking about, where you have like in season versus off season, and, youth athletes don't understand this balance because, they're just beginning to experience it, and even seasoned athletes, and sometimes even pros, forget that you can't improve and perform at the same time, and everything comes in waves. And, you had this great article about less is not more and more is not always better. And that this was about how training is a necessary stressor. And I'd love to talk more about why training and recovery is needed to elicit adaptation, because that's a huge key for people to understand.
Definitely. I mean, that's a big thing that I like to talk about with athletes, is that there's a big difference between working out and feeling healthy, and that's awesome, and then training, and that the human body wants to be in this state called homeostasis. It wants to be balanced. So the moment that you impose a type of stressor to it, such as through strength training, the body gets put out of whack. And when you start to push it incrementally past this capacity for your body to be able to return itself to homeostasis, it has to adapt. And your body says, oh crap, this thing keeps happening. We have to adapt so that our baseline can kind of spread a little bit. So then when that thing keeps coming at us, she keeps imposing this type of training on us, we'll adapt so that we can maintain in homeostasis. And that's kind of what strength training does, is that you say, hey, I need to get stronger. So you incrementally, over the course of time, over let's even just say a week, introduce a little more volume, a little more strength, a little heavier loads, even just improving the movement pattern of a squat. And then you have your little back off period, because your body cannot recover without you pulling back on that amount of stress. You can't keep stressing it. If you keep stressing it, I like to think we're on a spectrum, and that On the left-hand side, let's say you are in a hole and you are like, oh my God, beaten down on the ground. And then on the right-hand side, you're like, I'm killing it. I am performing. So depending on where you're at in your season, you're going to change where you're at on that spectrum. And then let's just say that your body always wants to be performing, right? That's that homeostasis. So as you introduce stress through training, your body keeps pushing down towards that in that hole area. If you give your body a little time to relax and recover, it then is able to push back to that performance. And here's the cool thing. That area where your body's going to perform, that spectrum keeps going to the right, and that you can keep getting better. However, if you don't tell your body, I need to get better, and keep pushing it beyond that homeostatic capacity, your body's just going to chill where it's at. And I mean, thank goodness it does, because that's what keeps us alive. But at the same time, if you're trying to get better, you have to stress your body. But like I said, if you're stressing your body towards that hole, you're going to be overly fatigued. And I love the saying, fatigue masks fitness. And then if you're too fatigued, you never get to showcase all of that fitness or improvements or the adaptation. So this is when you have to think about the seasonality of your sport, and that there is a time to shine and there's a time to prepare your body so it can shine even brighter. So when you're in that off season, or the furthest period away from your actual competition phase, that's when it's time to put in the work. And if you only ever so often put in the work, you're not stressing your body enough to adapt. So that's the time where it's like, okay, cool, I'm pushing myself. As you get closer to the season, you reduce the amount of stress that you put on your body, because now it's time to shine. But if you stop putting that stress on, your body is just going to revert back to where it is, because adaptation is an energetic process. So if I stop that stress, your body says, hey, we can go back to where we were before, because let's conserve, because your body doesn't want to expend additional energy if it does not have to. So that's where that balance comes in. And that when you're in the preparatory period, that's when it's time to stress your body in a different way than your season stresses you. So even if we think of injury, I need to really prepare my body for those loads that I'm going to be exposed to on the field. So off season should be much more just one, building your overall aerobic base, because aerobic base is going to help you recover. So that's like long, steady state, as well as building a little bit more muscle mass, doing a more high volume, a little GPP, so a little different movement patterns, just getting your body ready. As you start getting closer to your season, your conditioning should start to change so it reflects the actual bioenergetic components of your sport. So volleyball, you should not be running 3 miles leading up to season,
you need
right?
to be jumping.
You need to be
jumping and cutting.
Short sprints, exactly, because that's what the conditioning component is. For strength training, off-season higher volume. As you get closer and closer to the preseason season, that's when you need to make sure that you're putting some load on your back. You're getting those muscles stronger. And then as you get into that season, you're making sure those strong muscles know how to produce power and become fast and be able to be as powerful as possible so you can jump super high. And that's kind of the beauty of a training program versus just saying, I did legs, I'm going to work on my abs today, I'm going to work on my jumps today. And that's awesome. The fact that you're putting in effort is awesome. However, from a scientific standpoint, your body is not going to adapt to random stresses applied at different areas. Your body is going to be so much easier to be able to stay within that homeostatic capacity versus incrementally adding more stress and then back off periods, and their body goes, crap, we got to adapt.
And that's why you need to go to Relentless Athletics, or go to a strength and conditioning coach, especially, these youth athletes that really want to see, training adaptations, because it's important.
A big thing too with youth athletes is that we see, you can have the conversation about year-long athletes, all of that. My favorite conversation to say, there's a difference between technical training and tactical training. Tactical training is like, where am I on the field when this happens? Where are you going to go when your teammate is here? If you're playing soccer, where do you have to go? That's tactical. Technical is like, one, can my body handle the stresses of a lot of running? You got to make sure it can do that. Is it well conditioned? Got to make sure it can do that. Does my body understand how to cut? Because if I don't build those components first before I'm worried about where my player is on the field, you're doing your player a very large disservice. Awesome. She understands the tactile nature of that sport. However, if she's not technically ready to handle the stressors of that sport, she's never going to play well, and she's probably at a much higher risk of injury. So as a youth athlete, before you even worry about where is my training cycled around my sport, you need to say, one, am I training so that I've developed coordination and rhythm? What about, do I understand general movement patterns? Can I squat, hinge, press, pull? Do I understand what it means to stabilize? What's my relative strength like? Can I do an actual push-up, a pull-up, even just regular body weight squats with
Can I handle my body weight?
Exactly. And then you're like, okay, cool. Am I able to load that a little bit and get stronger? What about my reactive elastic qualities? Can I actually jump? Can I actually figure out the technique of starting and stopping? And then, do you have a love of sport and training? Because if you do not have a love for it, you're not going to last long. And when you're a youth, our goal is to make sure that you last as long in the sport as possible. So let's focus on that. And once you have those bases, that base groundwork set, that makes you say, okay, cool. Now it's time to start implementing a periodized training program around a sport where you're like, here are my main seasons. And then as you keep getting better, you should probably now only have one season when it's time to shine because you focused on one sport. Think of it as a pyramid. Build the base, and then that peak will be as high as possible. If you focus on that peak first, your athlete's going to crumble.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. You know, we've talked a lot about strength training. We've talked a lot about movement and the ability to be able to handle those tactile or those tactical situations. You know, the other piece of this that we haven't talked about is nutrition. That if this piece of, you can be doing perfect training, you can be doing, you know, semi-perfect rest, because that's also a big piece of this. You know, but if your nutrition isn't not necessarily on point, but if it isn't in a general area where it supports that, you're still at risk of injury. You're still, you know, not seeing the full benefit of your training. And I know it's one of the services that you provide, and that it's so important for female athletes. It's so important to have general knowledge around how to fuel and feed your body for performance and for success, and not for guilt and aesthetic and, you know, everything that gets wrapped up in that. And as a female, you understand what that's like. You know,
Definitely.
I would love to know, you know, just kind of like the basics of how you're really educating these female athletes around the fundamentals about getting the raw materials to build our bodies and really support the training and the sport that they absolutely love.
Definitely. So if you go back to the spectrum I said between stress and recovery, right? Stress and performance. So training is a stress. Playing your sport is a stress. We have two main ways of recovery. Number one is sleep. Youth athletes should be getting at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Any less than that, you're doing your body a disservice, and that all of that stress you're imposing on your body, if you don't recover, you can then never adapt from it. So your body can never say, hey, it's time to get better. On top of that, nutrition is the second most important concept when it comes to recovering. So again, if you're putting in all the work, you're going to every single training practice, you're lifting weights, you're putting in all that necessary stress to give your body that need to adapt, and you're sleeping well. However, you're not following these nutrition fundamentals, you're limiting your ability to recover. And without recovery, there is no adaptation. So when it comes to nutrition, I like to think of it again as a pyramid, in that the base of your pyramid is, am I eating enough food? The end.
Can you say that enough? Can you say that again?
Oh, yeah. Am I eating enough food?
Because not enough people, and especially female athletes, and I know for a long time that was my problem, is not eating enough to support my level of training. So
exactly.
Preach.
So when we have athletes that are like, or even their parents that are like, should she be eating brown rice or white rice? And I'm like, okay, wait a second. That's totally an important conversation. But so much further up the pyramid, we need to make sure the base is established. Number one, is she eating enough food? Because if she's not eating enough food, her body will not recover. I don't even care where this food right now is coming from. We will have that conversation, but let's make sure she's eating enough. Because too often we see females that are not eating enough, and that's when you start seeing long-term things like injuries as well as menstrual dysfunction. So after I'm like, okay, calories in are just about equating to calories out. And we don't do that by counting because counting can be completely off. Instead, let's just think of, okay, is her body weight pretty stable? That's pretty a great indication because at the end of the day, if you're eating less calories than your body is expending, you lose body weight. It's very simple. It's that simple. Everyone likes to complicate it. Like, it's not about calories. Like, no, it is. It's an energy equation.
Well,
Energy
kinda.
in, energy out. Yeah. So after that, then we're like, okay, let's though make sure we're getting those calories are just energy. Make sure we're getting that energy from food that helps support recovery as well as performance. So number one, I have to like to talk about first protein because your body likes to look at protein, number one, as a building block because protein is a building block not only of your muscles, obviously, but of literally almost every other cell in your body. Protein is a building block for enzymes in your body. Enzymes help reactions run that much more efficiently. So if we're not eating enough protein, your body has to break down muscle. Well, muscle is what's allowing you to run fast, jump high. So losing muscle
can't be a good thing.
We're not going to perform very well. And then we're also might increase our chance of injury because we don't have enough muscle mass to help absorb those high stresses that we're imposing on our body in sport. So protein is honestly really simple to focus on. I mean, vegetarian, that's in a whole other conversation. But if we're just talking animal protein, females should be having, depending on your height and weight, around, I like to use my hand as a serving size, and that's what we do in our templates as well as our consults. We teach athletes how to look at food, serving size based on your hand. So a palm-size serving can range from 4 to 6 servings of protein a day, depending on your height, weight, activity level, that fun things. From there, after, let's get that. That's the most important, right? So let's make sure we're eating enough protein. Number 2, let's look at where we're getting energy because our body doesn't like to break down protein for energy because it takes time. We have to remove some nitrogen groups. It's just this process that allows our body to have energy at a much slower rate than our body needs when we need to jump high or sprint fast. So instead, let's look at if I have a hard training day for a female athlete, I need to prioritize carbohydrates as my energy source because carbohydrates are the only macronutrient that can be broken down through the anaerobic system. And just think that means very fast. So if you need to, again, jump high, sprint, and make sure that your body is able to repeat those high bouts of high intensity activity, we need to make sure that we're eating enough carbohydrates. And again, that's going to be depending on if it's a really hard day. We look at carbohydrates from the size of a fist. So it could range from 8 fist-sized portions to 20. Depends on if you have a super high, like those 2-a-days, even 3-a-days in preseasons. That's carbs on carbs on carbs.
That's wrestlers.
Exactly.
They have to have it.
They have to have it. And then I like to look at fats as our filler macronutrients. And that fats, one, they are definitely a building block in itself in that they are the foundation of all of our hormones, especially our sex hormones, as well as they are in literally every single cell of our body. That is called that is like literally the formation of every single lipid bilayer. That's like the outside of your cell. That's lipids, aka fats. So we need those. And then after that, fats are a great slow release energy in that they are broken down aerobically. So fats are great for athletes that are, I like to say that's like that low to medium intensity day that like you're not dying, right? You're not like going all out. You are just, you're maybe just having a quick, simple, tactical day where your practice is not composed of sprints or scrimmages, but more so, okay, so how do I run around? Where do I position myself? That's when fats are going to be a primary fuel source, as well as a lot of times during recovery as well, because recovery isn't, we need energy right now. It's we need energy sustained.
Yes.
So that's when we look at fats. So on days that you're going to be less active, you don't need as many carbs because you don't need as much of that quick energy, but instead we need more fats because fats are that slower energy. So that's when you're going to look at your thumb. And your thumb is a great way to look at fats for your portion size in terms of, again, that can range from like 5 thumb size to 10 to 12, depending again on your weight, your activity level, all of those fun things that we in our templates, we have that kind of written out for girls to be able to look at and be like, okay, I am 130 to 150 pounds, and this is a really hard day for me. And then we say, okay, this is how many palm-sized portions of protein you need, how many fist-sized portions of carbs you need, and then how many thumb-sized portions. That's the basis, right? We didn't even talk about, have you timed it, or is the food clean or not? Because that stuff, because it is. And it's so funny because if you look at social media and stuff, that's where all the emphasis is. And that's the peak of your pyramid. We need to focus on the base first. And that's where the fundamentals come into play. And once the fundamentals are established, then we can talk about how are we timing those carbs? Mm-hmm. Are we eating most of our carbs around that activity and fats are further away from it? Once that stuff's set, then we can look at what's quote unquote clean, because clean kind of means, let's say, nutrient dense.
Yes.
So we definitely need nutrient dense foods because that's going to help give us those micronutrients. I always ask athletes, do you even know what like micronutrients do? And they're
yes.
Like, and I'm like, think of those as little helpers to your enzymes to help every reaction in your body run that much faster, as well as they act as like building blocks in itself. And they help some of those different components of your body become what they are. So without eating a majority of nutrient dense foods, we might be limiting our overall recovery and performance. So you're eating enough food, you're eating enough protein, fats, carbs around the right times. Then let's look at, we tell our athletes the 80-20 rule. 80% of your time should be full of nutrient dense foods. Think whole grains, lean meats, healthy fats that are normally liquid at room temperature. 20% of the time, 20% of the time, you can then look at like, I want some ice cream. I want a burger and fries with my friends because you've earned it, girl. Like you've worked your butt off. You can totally do that stuff because yes, those foods are not as nutrient dense. However, they're still helping you meet that caloric intake that you need. They're of course adding to your total carbs, proteins, and fats. No, they may not contain as much micronutrients, but if 80% of your diet is full of those nutrient dense foods, you're good. And then maybe we'll talk about supplements. But that stuff is like the way, way top of the pyramid that I don't even care about until the bottom is established. And for the most part, the bottom is almost never established for this youth, adolescent age group that never was really taught that stuff because it's really confusing. If you look at it, people are like brown, white, and you're like, what the heck actually matters? It's confusing.
Absolutely. Nutrition can be such a complex and intimidating subject for youth athletes and especially female athletes. And I'm so excited that you are not only leading the charge in strength and conditioning, but also giving them the fundamentals and guidance on nutrition, which is such a critical piece of being able to step into our greatness as athletes. I know that you have some really cool programs and nutrition coaching that'll be coming up here. So I'll make sure to link to everything that you have going on with strength and conditioning and also with nutrition on the Relentless Athletics website. So this year, the Winning Elements theme is unstoppable, which is in some ways very similar to being relentless. And I love everything you're doing, the message that you're spreading, and how you continue to impact athletes and coaches. And unstoppable means different things to different people. And for you, what does unstoppable mean, and how are you living into that today?
I love the word unstoppable because it reminds me of the word relentless, both of which really mean to me that there is this unwavering pursuit to improve. And with that, I feel like I am unstoppable or live that relentless lifestyle, and that I am always on this pursuit to improve myself in all of the realms of my life. So as a coach, as a business owner, as an person, these are all things that I feel like by being unstoppable, I am committed to always trying to improve in one of those realms.
Well, you are definitely relentless and absolutely unstoppable, Emily. I hope you, the listeners, enjoyed Emily's journey and that you will continue to come back to this podcast to become inspired by the stories and empowered by the strategies shared so you can level up, unlock your true potential, and enjoy your own journey. I am so grateful for your attention and hope that you got something special out of this episode. Make sure you follow Emily and Relentless Athletics on Instagram. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget to tell your teammates and friends about this podcast. If you want to see us interact, you can watch this episode on YouTube. If you want more awesome content, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as always, you can join us on the athlete journey online at www.BeTheWinningElement.com. Until next time, train with purpose, play with passion, and seize the day every day.